to think that this is the country that is the bastion and the beacon of freedom in the world, and everybody's trying to get here, and meanwhile, those of us who are here are doing everything that we can to accommodate the enemies of freedom and to throw it all away. Anyway, with a first-hand story of that, it is now my great pleasure and honor to introduce David Wood of Act 17 Apologetics, a very courageous Christian evangelist who will give you a harrowing first-hand account of exactly how freedom is being lost in America today.
Maybe you're with the media and you don't know why I would consider these people heroes. For those of you who are up here on stage, raise your hand if you've been threatened with brutal death for what you do. Raise your hand if you've been threatened more than 100 times. 500?
Well, we stopped counting.
And yet, they're bigoted hate mongers for thinking that they're dealing with a dangerous ideology. You don't do what they do unless you are so concerned for other people and for freedom and human rights that you're willing to lay down your life. And that, my friends, is the definition of heroic behavior. So, there are basically two sides here to the Sharia debate. There are people who, like me, don't ever want to see Sharia or Islamic law influence laws in the West. And on the other side are people who say, hey, it's not much of a threat. It's not something to worry about. Now, I'll speak for myself here. My concerns about Sharia are based almost entirely on what Sharia actually says, what's actually in the sources. So I open up the Quran and I read Surah 9:29. Fight those who do not believe in Allah. Not fight in self-defense. Fight people who do not believe. It's fighting people based on their beliefs. I turn to Surah 5:51. Do not be friends with Jews and Christians. They are friends of each other. You choose your friends based on their religious beliefs. Surah 48:29. Those who are with Muhammad are severe against who? Against disbelievers, merciful among who? Among themselves. As a Muslim, you are commanded to be merciful towards your fellow Muslims, not to the unbeliever. Open up Surah 3, verse 110. What's it say? Who are the best people in the world? Muslims. What about Jews and Christians? You turn to Surah 98:6. Jews and Christians who reject the truth of Islam are the worst of creatures. We're lower than rats. It doesn't take a genius to look at these teachings and say, if you get enough people believing that this is the actual word of God, you're going to run into some conflicts with things like the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States. And yet we're told, no, it's no threat whatsoever. And I think that the people who disagree with me, they're not disagreeing based on what Islam teaches, right? If they read the sources, they'll see what Islam teaches. I think their argument goes something like this. David, if Islamic law were dangerous, then all Muslims would be dangerous. And yet I know many peaceful Muslims. And since there are so many peaceful Muslims, what they believe cannot be dangerous, and therefore I don't even need to look at what Islam teaches. I can tell you right now it's peaceful and tolerant, just like the Muslims we have. And so who's right here? Well, we get to a place like Dearborn, and it can actually help us learn something. Because, you see, there are plenty of peaceful, tolerant Muslims in Egypt and Iraq and Pakistan. And yet the oppressive rules of Sharia always seem to rise to the surface in spite of the peaceful, tolerant ones. And so what we should be asking ourselves is not whether there are peaceful and tolerant Muslims, it's whether here in the West, as numbers of Muslims grow, if the oppressive rules of Sharia are going to rise to the surface. And here we have excellent place to examine this issue, a place like the city of Dearborn. I came to Dearborn in 2008 as part of a group. I was teaching them about Islam because some of them they're Christian missionaries, Christian evangelists who don't necessarily know a lot about Islam, so they're wondering what Muslims might ask them and what Muslims might say about their beliefs and how they should respond. So I was doing that training, and afterwards we went out to a mosque in Dearborn, and we stood on the public sidewalks. And it was interesting, while we were there, the mosque was blasting the sermon over a loudspeaker over the entire neighborhood, blasting the message. I don't care. I don't have any problem with them doing that. It's a Muslim area. Go ahead and blast your message. Point is, if you're walking down the street on this public sidewalk, you are going to hear their message, what they have to say. And it's only fair then that other people should be able to share their message, right? It's the United States, we have to be equal here. So we tried to hand out some copies of the New Testament, some DVDs, not inside the mosque or on mosque property, on the public sidewalk so that people would see us as they're walking home and we could give them something. So we started handing things out. Dearborn police show up, ask us what we're doing, round us up into a little group. Then the police officer starts talking to the imam in Arabic, didn't know what he was saying, and then comes back and says, I want all of your ID cards right now. And then he spends about the next 15 minutes writing down all of our information, all of our addresses. This is kind of intimidating. And meanwhile, the imam, the leaders there, are shooing everyone home, shooing all the Muslims home, the people that we're going to distribute materials to. And so the officer finally let us go, and everyone was gone, and so we left. And so think about that. If you are a Muslim in that area, you are free to proclaim your message to anyone who walks down the street. If you try to proclaim a different message, police were going to get involved. And I found out things are a bit deeper the next year. 2009, went to the Arab International Festival, and police, the Dearborn Police Department announced beforehand, no one would be allowed to distribute materials on the sidewalk. Right? In prior years, you could distribute materials so you could go hand out things on the sidewalk. The sidewalk's not part of the festival. The festival's the street. On the sidewalks are still public sidewalks. So the Dearborn Police Department ruled, now you cannot come down here. We will arrest you if you are distributing materials on the sidewalk. So their reasoning is, we're applying this to everyone. So officially, there's nothing wrong with it. Now, if you were at that Arab festival, and some of you were, you walked down that festival, you walked down that sidewalk, what did you see? You saw people handing stuff out left and right. The rule would only be enforced if you're a Christian, you show up with a Bible. That's when, hey, we've got a problem here. So think about how brilliant this is, the way to get around the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States. We'll make a rule that applies to everyone. But we happen to be the police, so we will only enforce it on the people we don't want distributing materials. So since we weren't allowed to distribute materials, we decided to have a conversation, and we went and had this conversation based on something that was happening at the festival. You see, now that security had a little muscle behind them, the Dearborn Police, security was doing something very interesting and brilliant. I mean, it's diabolical, but it's brilliant. Security is walking up to Christians who are just there to have conversations with the Muslims, not Christians who are handing things out. It was still perfectly acceptable to have conversations. But if they saw you talking to Muslims, talking to some young Muslims trying to share the gospel, the security in plain clothes would come up to you and say, hey, I see you have a Bible there. Could I take a look at it for just a second? I wanted to look something up. As soon as you turn to hand the Bible, someone was over there, click, took a picture, come with us, you're going to police. And then they go to police, you see, right here we have this person on camera distributing Bibles. And then you were in trouble. And then you were scared. Brilliant plan, but we actually went up to a Muslim booth that had a big sign up there, got questions, we got answers. We wanted to ask a question, whether they kind of agree with what's going on, because according to Surah 9:29, Muslims are supposed to subjugate non-Muslims and take away their rights. So we want to know if they actually approve of what's going on there. We got our answer because security started slapping us all over the place. And we left that year. We came back to make sure that police, who told us they were going to make sure that sort of thing didn't happen again, we wanted to make sure that police are going to keep their end of the bargain, so we came back. And you know what happened there? Of course, we were arrested. We were thrown in jail. I'm sure you've heard stories. We were screaming at people and starting a riot and so on. Sorry, I was there. We were leaving the festival. My friend Nabil was walking out. A group of young Muslims came up to him, started asking him very good questions. They're asking him the sorts of questions we really want to answer. Questions like about what Christians believe and so on. Questions about the Bible. We love to answer those questions. Nabil's answering the questions. He's praising these young Muslims for asking these questions. Police come up, put us all in handcuffs, take us off to jail, throw us in jail. And of course, later on, that's when I hear the stories that we were screaming at people and starting a riot and so on from the lovely mayor of Dearborn, Mayor O'Reilly. But the most horrifying aspect of everything that happened for me wasn't being thrown in jail. It's what we heard while we were there. While we were in the Dearborn jail, a police officer told Nabil and Paul, two of my friends who were arrested, that they agree with us not all police officers. He's saying there are some of us here who agree with you in exposing what's going on. And, you know, Nabil pointed out that, hey, we're here in jail, you know, how can you agree with us, and so on. And he said, you don't have to tell me. I've gone into houses here in Dearborn where girls have been killed for having boyfriends, and the department keeps it quiet. I've never heard of any honor killings here in Dearborn. And yet, according to a police officer, it's happening, and they're making sure people don't know about it. Now, could he be lying? I guess it's possible. I have no clue why he would make something like that up, because it's horrible. And so we get out of jail thinking, wow, I'm starting to understand what's going on here. And, you know, the whole time, though, I'm thinking, you know, hey, this is the police department. It's a problem with the police department. Surely, when the prosecuting attorney sees this, he's going to throw this out. Wrong. Wrong. This is Dearborn. And then I think, well, once it gets in front of the judge, obviously the judge is going to throw this out. Wrong. They came after us. We had a 5-day trial. And just, I'll give you a little personal insight here. I have 4 children. I have 4 boys, 4 sons. 2 of them have genetic disabilities. The disabilities are as bad as it can possibly be. If it was any worse, you'd just be dead as soon as you're born. They can't breathe on their own. They can't eat on their own. They don't swallow. They move their arms and stuff, but that's about it. So we have our 2 youngest sons. I don't like leaving my wife at home with all 4 boys, knowing that she has to take care of all of them. But we've agreed I will go out if there's something important to do. It's something, you know, that we both consider important. I don't consider a 5-day ridiculous trial for my friend answering some questions at a public festival important. So this was just horrifying to me that I'm leaving my wife home to come here for a week for a ridiculous trial. And while I was gone, the mayor had sort of incited so much hatred against us, had told people that we scream at Muslims, we yell at Muslims, we tell Muslims they cannot come to our country unless they convert to Christianity. I've never said such a thing. And to all the Muslims of the world, you Muslim women out there who are being oppressed, if you can get to a country like the United States where you can have freedom, you do it, girl. And so I've never said that in my life, and that's what the mayor is telling people that we do. And we are getting death threats from people saying they're going to kill us for what we do. Not based on anything we actually do, based on what the mayor is saying we do. And then on top of all of that, when people requested the police reports, people are putting in requests so they could read what actually happened because they're getting conflicting reports. When they actually are sending out the police reports, they blotted out everyone's home address information except mine. They left it right there. I was the one who made the video against the head of the police department. And so they incite people until they want to kill us, and then they give them basically a roadmap to my house. And I'm away in Dearborn, and my wife is scared. And she actually has to sit down with my 2 oldest sons who are healthy and tell them, if you hear someone come into this house who is hurting me, I want you to hide and don't come out. And no matter how bad you hear me scream, just hide because I'm more worried about you. And that is a conversation that should never happen in the United States of America. There are places where that conversation needs to take place. That conversation has to take place in Pakistan and Sudan and Egypt and Iraq. That conversation has to take place. It should never happen here, and yet now it has to. And I'll just be honest, I live in the Bronx. It's not known for being the best area of the world. I feel safer walking down the street in the Bronx in the middle of the night than I do walking down the street of Dearborn in broad daylight, not because I'm worried about Muslims attacking me, because I have no confidence in the police here, in the legal system, in your courts, in your judges. I view them as all corrupt, and I've seen it firsthand. And so, I feel helpless walking down the street, and I'll say I am glad that there are lawyers in this country who are willing to take this on, because if they weren't here, where else would I turn? And you're about to hear from one of them. God bless you all.